Well, Brad Lindmark is joining us today on the journey, and welcome for coming this morning. And so let me first, just as I always do when we first start, just explain a little bit about what the journey is about. And the journey is just having ordinary individuals come on and talk about stories of transformations, talk about stories of resiliency, stories of recreating themselves, either maybe because of some greater calling than they're being asked to come into, or maybe because of some kind of setback or some kind of thing that may have happened in their life that now, because of that, they felt like they had to do something and move forward with that. And so I know, Brad, we just met recently in the last few months, and it was actually at Xavier Whitford's Suicide Awareness Walk.
Right.
And so why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what do you do?
Well, I was born and raised in this area, so
Okay.
Rockford has a place in my heart. Currently live in Roscoe with my family.
Okay.
Parents are still here in Rockford.
Okay.
But the main thing, my brother that was deputy chief, police department, committed suicide. It'll be 5 years this February 9th.
Okay.
So it was a wake-up call, a calling, if you want to call it that,
Okay.
that decided to do something positive, and
Okay.
maybe this won't happen to another family is the ultimate dream, although
Sure.
that's a dream.
Okay. All right.
So we started the foundation to help first responders deal with what they see, the cumulative stress, PTSD, and learn so much along the way. It's crazy, some of the statistics that are out there and why more isn't being done to help the first responders. It's kind of maddening.
Yeah. So before we get into that element of what you're doing with the Greg Lindmark Foundation, but this isn't your full-time job.
No.
So what do you do to get paid for it?
I'm a salesman, marketing director of a company called American Metal Technologies and Racine. So we do sell machine parts, castings and whatnot.
Gotcha. And how long have you been doing that?
About a year and a half at this company, but I've been in die casting and machining 32 years.
Okay, so that's been essentially in sales and in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so that's what you've been doing.
You're correct.
Okay, and you said you're married, right?
Right.
Yeah. And do you have children?
2 children. A son, Zach, who's 19, and my daughter, 16, Anna. My wife, Margie.
Okay, all right. And your daughter goes to Hononegah, or?
That's correct. Yeah, she goes to Hononegah. My son just graduated. That's one thing my wife does so much for the foundation. It's kind of crazy that she and the kids too are involved. But without my wife, this probably wouldn't be possible either.
I resemble that. Diane's a big part of my ability to be able to do all the things that I'm able to do. So, and so your brother Greg, and so you grew up here in Rockford. What high school did you graduate from?
Guilford High School.
Guilford. Okay. All right. And how many individuals in your family?
It was just my brother and I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Greg was younger, older?
He was 2 years older.
2 years older. Yeah. Okay. And he was a police officer, and that's what he had done his entire life. Is that correct?
That's all he wanted to do, even as a kid. He wanted to be a police officer.
Interesting. Okay. All right. And then mom and dad, what'd your dad do?
My dad was a salesman also, sales manager. Same thing, castings.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. And did mom work outside the house?
Yeah, she worked for a while there at Len's Pharmacy, if you remember. Len's Pharmacy. Yeah. And then mostly worked at home.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So, and when you were in high school, now, did you go on to school right away afterwards, or were you?
Yeah, I went to Rock Valley, and then went to Western Illinois for a year, and then back to Rock Valley. Played baseball there, and got my marketing degree from Rock Valley.
Okay, all right. And so, did you play baseball at Rock Valley or play baseball at Western?
Rock Valley.
Rock Valley. Yeah. Okay, all right. I know that I don't know about back then, but I know the sports at Rock Valley have just been amazing.
Oh, they've been doing a great job with their athletic programs.
Yeah,
their softball team, I don't think, it's lost in 3 years or something crazy.
And their basketball, boys and girls, have been in the national championship, have won the national championship. It's been pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, it wasn't like that back then when I went there.
And I graduated there as well, and I don't recall it being that way back in the 80s either. So tell us a little bit about when you and Greg were growing up. He was 2 years younger, and so what was it like from what you remember? That was a couple of years ago when you guys were growing up.
Just a few.
Yeah. What was it like? How did you guys get along? What was Greg like? What were you like back growing up?
Greg was, like I said, 2 years older, so it was the typical kids when you're kids, always wanting to win. The two of us, my dad used to always say, neither one of you can stand to lose. So it always end up in scraps of some sort or arguments. And as we both grew older, he was my best friend. I mean, he was always there for me, and he always wanted to be like the big brother, followed him around, and he always let me go with him and his friends as they got older. It wasn't a thing he didn't want his little brother around, so it was good growing up.
So then Greg graduated from Guilford as well. Did he go on to school right away?
Yeah, he went to Madison Area Technical College, played basketball there, and got his law enforcement degree there.
Okay, all right. And then he came back then did he start in Rockford right away, or did
he wanted to? He was a cadet, and then they had a hiring freeze back then, so he went to Lake Forest because he could get on the department there in Lake Forest, Illinois.
Okay.
And then when Rockford was hiring again, he came back and got hired on.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And so as he was doing that, now you said he always wanted to be a police officer, always knew that that's what he wanted to do. And so when you remember those stories about did he ever talk to you about what that was, why that was, or what that was about?
I think he never really explained why. That's just what he wanted to do.
Sure.
I mean, ever since he was probably 6 or 7, 8 years old, he wanted to be a police officer. Okay. And then a Rockford police officer, Charlie Jackson, moved in next door, him and his wife and kids, and that just iced it.
Sure. Okay.
He'd always listened to his stories and wanted to be just like him. So.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot of times about the idea that how something, either it can be positive or negative, but some type of thing it will impact us during those grade school years and have an impression on us. Mm-hmm. And we may have an idea about something, and then, as you said, it cements. So and so then we know this is what I want to do, or this is going to be a part of my life. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like that was very much what it was for Greg.
Oh yeah, he never veered from that. He just wanted to be a policeman.
Okay. And so as you remember, with his career, and you said you guys became not just brothers, but then also became really close friends and best friends as you were going through your adult years. What do you recall being a brother of a police officer and all the different things? Because I first met Greg when I was working at the Harlem School District, and I was in charge of. I was a school social worker for the self-contained behavior disorder classroom, and he came out and was very supportive of what we were doing at Harlem, and I believe at that time he was involved with the gang task force, and so he was always trying. Anybody who was willing to bring awareness into the school system, he seemed to always be there.
Right. You hear so many stories, that he's left us that how much good he did. Mm-hmm. He left the Masters tournament. He went down to watch the Masters one year and left to come back to speak for the victims of homicides in Rockford, and I never knew that. Okay. Just one story after another. At the visitation, it wasn't just a sorry for your loss when people came through the line. Everybody had a story. He was always there for everybody. He really helped his community, and anything to make it better, he was for it. Or to comfort other officers have told me they wish they had $1 for every time they walked by his office when he was consoling family members from a homicide.
Yeah. Well, when you just talked about that, I for the last 10 years, I've been running that group for the homicide support group for the state's attorney's office, and in all the times that I was there, there over the last 10 years, Greg would be there every time. Every time that, I don't think he ever missed of the times that I was there. And sometimes, he spoke the one time, I know, and then other times he was just there and just being a support. And I definitely think that's, that was the impression I got, was that the families who struggled so much with having someone in their life taken from a violent crime, that he it's tough because
right.
as a police officer, as a detective, there's a lot of things you can't share as they're trying to build a case, and there's frustration of not being able. Sometimes there isn't a lot to go on, and
right.
and you want to be able to help those family members.
Yeah, that's like you mentioned earlier about being a policeman, a family member of a policeman. I mean, there's times that they would, Christmas, Thanksgiving, you didn't know if he was going to be there or not. It just depended. If something happened, he had to go.
Right.
Kids' birthdays, anything, parents' birthdays. Yeah. If he had to go, he had to go.
Yeah.
And it was quite a few times that you didn't know if he was going to be there or not. And I know that weighed on him too. But it's your job. He took very serious, and like I say, that was his calling.
Sure. And as again, being not only a family member, but be a brother, and you guys were very close. Yeah, if those times, obviously, there's times when what a police officer, what a detective is, what they're exposed to, and in therapy, we refer to it as secondary trauma. It's that when a traumatic event happens to someone and then they're retelling that story, or in this case, a first responder, a police officer comes to the scene, most of the time it's after the scene, after
right.
the incident has already happened. And then when someone starts internalizing that, and anything, and then sometimes, right, with a family member, I've counseled different family members over the years, and then they hear about the stories, maybe not from their loved one, maybe not from the police officer, the first responder, but they read from the paper, and they hear about stuff in the news, and then they start filling in the blanks. What was that like as a family member, knowing that your brother was involved with a lot of different things because of his job, and some of the ugly things that happen in our community? He was asked to step into that.
All right. I guess the biggest thing I take away from all that is how proud I was to be his brother. Everything he did for the community, the victims of crimes, solving crimes, he took it so serious as to no case go unsolved. He worked it hard. I guess that's the biggest thing, is just beaming with pride to be his brother.
Okay, all right. You said something earlier about the idea of there's a tendency that a younger brother looking up to an older brother anyways, but then when your older brother is that active in the community and is as well known, as well respected as Greg has been and continues, when people talk about him. So let's talk a little bit about what happened with Greg. As far as you understand, as far as you know what happened, he worked for 30-some years, and then he retired. And so tell us a little bit about what you understood has happened, and so we can kind of maybe get a little bit of a grasp, because part of this particular conversation for sure is we want individuals to know not only your story as someone who has been impacted by a family member having depression and as a result of that then dying from suicide, but then also the fact that he was a first responder, he was a police officer, and what that was about, and then what the foundation does. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you understood?
Unfortunately, this isn't a unique case. There's just too many first responders committing suicide, and it's not just suicide. It's, like you said, depression. It affects people in so many different ways. A statistic that just drives me crazy is every day in the United States, 3 first responders commit suicide. Why is that? What other profession would that be allowed before somebody stepped in and did something to help? Which is kind of where the foundation, the idea of it started, with obviously losing Greg. But I learned so much about these different statistics. Police officers are 60% more likely to commit suicide than any other profession. Why is that? How can this keep going on in this country? I mean, the 3 suicides a day by first responders are just the reported ones. There's who knows how many unreported on top of that number. It's crazy that this still happens in the United States. And it's not, it's everybody. It's the victims, it's the families of the victims. Too often, I think our police officers and firefighters and 9/11 dispatchers, all of them, my brother wasn't a deputy chief. He was a deputy chief, let me clarify that, but that isn't who he was. That was his job, that was his profession. Too often I think, he's a firefighter, he's a policeman. No, they're human beings. They deal with things that it shouldn't be their identity. That's just what they do for a living. I'm a salesman. Nobody looks at me and says, he's a salesman. It's the human part of it for the first responders and the victims and the families of the victims, and it's just a big snowball effect that it's devastating that this is allowed to keep going on in this country. We're better than this. The law being passed, the Officer Greg Lindmark Memorial Law, which got passed by a cumulative vote of 202-0 downstate a couple years ago, that is going to require police officers to train down the academy in PTSD, cumulative stress, recognition of. Then every 3 years they take a refresher course. So that was big for the foundation, and big that my brother's name is attached to that law. Hopefully that helps too, that it gets it out there more, the stigma of I'm a policeman, I'm a firefighter, I'm tough, I don't need help. Well, what if somebody finds out I went for counseling? Will they take my badge? Will they take my gun? Will I be suspended? It's that needs to be broken down. It's like we always say, it's okay not to be okay.
So maybe you can speak on that, and for whoever may be listening, regarding if a police officer or a first responder of any type does seek out help, does seek out counseling. Maybe it's because of PTSD, those are PTSD symptoms. Maybe it's because of anxiety. Maybe it's because of depression, or maybe just some family problems. Are they at risk of losing their position, their badge, losing their gun?
I don't think they are anymore, but it's still that stigma attached to it. And the biggest thing is breaking down that I'm a tough firefighter, I'm a tough policeman, this can't be happening to me, bury it inside. Think of a police officer or a fireman that comes home at night to his wife. He'd just been shot at. How was your day, honey? I was fine. Does he want to tell his wife he was shot at to worry her? No. Police officers, spouses, when their husband or wife goes to work, they think, just bring them home safe. There's more suicides by police officers than in the line of death duties. Nobody talks about that, and rightly so. They should be worried about them coming home safely. I'm not downplaying that at all, but the bigger fear should be the suicide and your mental health. It's not just suicide, it's depression, it's alcohol, abuse of any kind. Just being healthy, you take care of your physical health, not your mental health. Why is that? I don't know.
Well, and just as similar to yourself, as a response to something my son had gone through with his classmates, I started Shatter Our Silence, the nonprofit for suicide awareness for young adults. And as I was, even though I'd been a social worker for 25 years at that time, what I come to realize about about suicide and the countertransference that therapists have regarding that, professionals in general have, and the stigma around it. Suicide is the end result of that darkness consuming. Most of the time when we've done the research and my own personal, just with the clients that I've worked with over the years, and then research that I've done with studies, that most people who are in that darkness, that darkest of dark places, with the hopelessness and despair is the greatest, they don't necessarily want to die, but they want their situation to change. But they've come to believe, because of the depression, which lies to them, they don't think there's another option. So they take this permanent solution to what could conceivably be a temporary problem, because they just, for whatever reasons, can't see around the next corner. Now, we, of course, afterwards, we, like, if we just would have and just could have, that there's a whole nother space open up, around that corner. But I think that's part of what happens with the depression. It may start off as anxiety, it may start off as PTSD, but the more that it's kept inside, that depression grows stronger, the walls come in more and more, and that darkness grows. And I think that's what I've come to learn about in that darkest place. It ends up being, not all the time, but a lot of times, a decision based upon that feeling, that sense that it's not going to change. And so many times, if we could just, help them buy some more time. Right. This type of intervention, talk to this person, whatever it may be. And I think there is misconceptions about it. And if I go to the doctor and get on an antidepressant, which is a big step for a lot of people, then that'll fix everything. But a medication isn't going to cure PTSD. Right. It is not going to heal PTSD. It'll help you with what may be going on regarding the depression, so you can do the work regarding what you've experienced.
Right. And then you see on the commercials for these drugs, it's may cause suicide. Yeah. I thought it was supposed to do the opposite, but the drug isn't the answer. It's getting mentally healthy. Yeah.
It can be part of the formula. Right. It can be part of the formula. But in itself, there needs to be another component, which we start looking into. What is the story that person is telling themselves based upon that event? Right. When as close as going back to with Greg's story, Greg had worked hard in his career, and he had been in a lot of different roles, a lot of different positions, and he had ascended to the rank of deputy chief, which is, for the people who may not know, if you think about the chief of police, right, and then is the next step down deputy chief?
Yeah, the next step is deputy chief.
Next step, okay. And there's just one deputy chief, or
at the time there were when Greg was a deputy chief, there were 4.
Okay, so like maybe over a particular type of division or a particular type of
okay. Right. They have the different divisions. He had violent crimes.
Gotcha. Okay. And so his career from that standpoint had been very acknowledged, had been very successful, and then he had retired. How old was he when he retired?
I believe he was 51 when he retired, and then he took a job as lead investigator for Briscato.
Okay, for the state's attorney at that time.
Yep.
Okay. And was that a full-time job as well?
It was full-time, 40 hours, but the hours that Greg kept, that was part-time. Because I would say he averaged 70 to 80 hours a week.
Okay.
He was always gone.
Okay. So he was still involved with doing something, but his role had changed,
right?
And obviously, and I'm guessing and not knowing for sure, but then some of the brotherhood of being on the Rockford Police Department may have been different, because I would assume that was different than just being a lead investigator.
Right. I mean, it's a brotherhood. Police and fire, they all have it, and that's wonderful. I kind of saw that come together when Kevin Rice was killed. He was in the gang unit that Greg was in charge of at the time, and it is a brotherhood. It helps get through. Kevin's death, I mean, it happened on Greg's birthday, August 3rd, actually, at like 1 in the morning, and he called me about 3 in the morning and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know Kevin was killed, because I was friends with Kevin and his brother Elmer, and Greg and I would do things together, and before you heard it on the news, man, I just want to let you know I got to go. He goes, I don't know when I'll be home. I think he worked 3 days straight without sleep until they caught the fellow that did it. So it was, that's another thing. I mean, how do you wake up and get a call, one of your good friends just was murdered, and you stay up for 3 days and solve the case? But at the time, I remember I called him, how you doing? Maybe you should come home, get some sleep or something. No, I got to do this. I can't, Other people are going home. We got to find this guy. It's not gonna. Yeah. So there's a lot of different, I was just a friend that died, but there's a lot of different things that happen in all first responders' lives. Greg isn't unique by any means. Right. I mean, they all see it.
Right. Yeah. You had mentioned when we had talked before what kind of warning signs did you see with Greg? Typically, they say that there's warning signs leading up to it. Did you see any indicators that he was in a depression, or a depression that was possibly leading to suicide?
I never dreamed it would come to suicide. He was kind of withdrawn. Wasn't as active as he used to be. Laid around more, and he never laid around. Okay. And part of little brother, family member, whoever you think, maybe just tired. He's been running his whole life, but never would have dreamed of it. And I believe it was you that I talked to about suicide at the time, and I always thought it was, I don't want to say selfish, but I think Kevin, you told me that it's the most unselfish act that someone could do, because when a person commits suicide, more times than not, they think everyone around them is better off if they're not in it. And that was a really eye-opener for me when we talked about that.
And I think a lot of times, for people who are listening who've lost someone from suicide, and because of that loss, they may still be wrestling with that and struggling with that, so they may be upset, be angry, and that's normal. It's a normal response to someone being gone, and that because typically, like if someone dies from a violent crime or from an accident or cancer takes them, then you can be mad at the perpetrator. You could be mad at the person driving the car. You could be mad at the cancer because you took my loved one, you took my friend, and they were victimized by that. But I think what complicates it with suicide is that this person chose. And I think that is one of the elements that we struggle with. Is yes, technically there was a choice, but it is so many times so influenced by the depression that they believe that they're in this darkness, that they believe the thoughts of, well, she'll be better off if I'm not here. He'll be better off. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I don't want, I'm not who I used to be. I can't do this. I don't see, we're not going this way anymore. We're doing this way. And that's where that depression distorts things and distorts the thoughts. It's almost like there's a haze, and I imagine that if you spend you talked about being sleep deprived for 3 days, that's going to distort your perceptions as well. But depression also distorts that perception, and a person may start believing that they would be better off. People would be better off if they weren't here, and I don't know many people who've been left behind that would agree with them. I would, I've had many family members who tell me they would, like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
We're not better off that you're not here.
Yeah, it's tough. Not just my brother, but my best friend, and you think of it as, man, what more could I have done? Should I have talked to him more? Should I don't want to say intervene, because I didn't really see a reason to intervene.
Right.
But that kind of leaves the family members, and my wife and my kids and my parents talk about it too. I mean, it's like, what should we have done? Educating yourself, which I've done through this, starting the foundation and the good that we're doing. It's, if I known then what I know now, I don't know. It's a tough thing for anybody with suicide that happens in their family. You're constantly fighting the what if I had done this or that. But the more I learn, the easier that is to get a hold of.
Well, and I do think that it's very much I think it's a pretty normal response. If I knew what I know now, then I would have. But I wouldn't know what I know now if that wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey of recreating ourselves, because there was a study that was done by the International Study on victimhood, right? People that have been impacted by trauma, such as national disasters or some type of mass shooting, but it could be as big as that, but it also could be as traumatic as death by suicide or some kind of setback because of a life-changing injury. And they say that all people respond to these types of instances in one of three ways. One, some people permanently get stuck. They're permanently dispirited. So they get to this point. This happens to them, and they are caught in that what if and being stuck with what could I have done? Why didn't I do? Why'd this happen to me? And they get stuck there, and that's where they stay. Others, I don't know exactly how they do this, but they somehow then move on, as if it maybe didn't even happen at all. I'm not for sure how category number 2 works.
I don't know how that would work either.
And then the third category is that because this event happened, it then calls them to something greater than themselves, something that they wouldn't have done if this wouldn't have happened. So they take that pain, they take the energy from that pain, that loss, and then they move forward to try to be part of a solution to maybe so it doesn't happen again, or at least reduces that. And I think that's very much, it sounds like what happened with yourself.
Yeah, I was definitely in the number 1 category for a while. I was stuck for quite some time. My wife kind of drug me out of that. Okay. I have 2 children to live for, parents. And then it was, going into the number 3. It's definitely a calling. I'm very passionate about it. It's even like the confidential counseling we offer. I mean, I see the first person that used it, I got the bill from the counselor, and it's just the counselor's last name, a patient number, how many visits. It's totally confidential. I don't even want to know. I don't care. But when I got the first bill, I remember it like it was yesterday, sitting on the couch, and the hair went up on my arms and tears came down my cheeks. It's like, I didn't know if I should be happy or sad at that time, because we're doing something to help, but it's unfortunate somebody needs the help. But God bless them for getting it.
So one of the things the foundation does is it works at trying to raise awareness and raising resources and funds, so that one of the initiatives is not only to be able to possibly change legislation so that certain things are required of first responders, but then it's also, as you just mentioned, to provide counseling So speak a little bit about how does the foundation, on the political end, you've already talked about that a little bit, what it's doing to try to make things change at the macro level. But then on the very much on the ground level, talk about a little bit about what the foundation offers to do.
Well, first of all, the confidential counseling, which we feel is more of a Band-Aid. It's not getting the law. Hopefully, will help so they don't get to that point. I don't know if that'll be the case or not. The counseling is always needed. I mean, you're a counselor, you know that. Everybody needs to take care of their mental health. We also do. We're sponsoring a therapy dog that'll go around to the different fire stations. We've gone to fire departments, talked a little bit at meetings, brought in food for them, just to let people know we're there for them. The awareness just in the community of, trying to humanize our first responders. They're not police, like I said earlier. They're not firemen. Right. They're humans. And the statistics I mentioned earlier, again, that's something that people don't know. It's crazy that is allowed to happen. We do, when a spouse is killed, suicide, or officers killed by suicide or in the line of duty, we offer financial assistance right away, just a donation to the surviving spouse.
Okay.
There's so many things we do. If somebody has stress, something causing stress, a child is sick in the hospital, we'll offer financial assistance, donations, I should say. It's just anything to help any first responder. It's kind of what we're there for.
Okay.
If you visit our website, which is GregLindmarkFoundation.com, you can see the whole list. We want to be transparent with it. We don't want anyone to ever question, where's this money going?
Sure.
So we list about 95% of the things we've done. We need to update it again, but are on our website.
Okay. So if someone wanted to get involved with the Greg Lindmark Foundation, what would, because anytime we do these talks, right, there's going to be a possible, what could they do? What's the call to action? And so one way would be to go to the website and possibly donate. And so that's right. One way. But what are some other ways that people can?
They can go to the website. If they want to volunteer, there's an area there they can fill out. We're always looking for help. It's a second full-time job that you don't get paid for, but I do get paid for it. It's part of the healing. Yeah. And to help first responders that are always there for us. Why wouldn't you want to do that? We had an annual, we're going to have them a couple times a year now, first responder appreciation dinner. I believe we talked about that. We're possibly speaking at our next one. I had somebody ask me, why would you do this? I'm thinking, I held up for a little bit because I could say what was on my mind, but I'm like, why wouldn't you? Why would somebody ask that question? Why would you have an appreciation dinner for first responders? He probably didn't mean it that way when he asked me that question. Sure. Every day we should be appreciating them. I mean, you think of a profession, you make a phone call, they come, sirens blaring, and they're coming to help you. Should you appreciate that? Absolutely. What would we be without them as a country? It's craziness.
Right. So, like you were talking about, helping out, someone could come and volunteer and be part of when you guys are doing the appreciation dinners. I know you have a golf outing that's coming up in August, is that correct?
August 9th, at Forest Hills.
And so there's probably going to be some needs for some help. So I know that's going to be a pretty big event that you're going to have, and people can be either participate in that, right, and either by golfing or donating regarding that particular event itself, but then also you'll just need physical bodies that maybe people that don't have necessarily financial resources to donate, but maybe they can donate their time.
Oh, absolutely. We always need help in the time. And there's also a dinner-only option. You want to come for dinner, come for dinner. There's a social hour in between there. Show up and show your support for the first responders. If somebody wants to volunteer their time, that would be great. We're always looking for help.
Well, and I know that even sometimes simple things things. Having bands, right? Could be just wearing that, and then knowing the story about what does the bracelet represent, and then being able to share that. Because you had said something earlier, and I've talked to many individuals who've chosen door number 3 when they've had a traumatic event happen in their life, and they talk about what you just said, is that this has been a way for them to take that energy in the grief and the loss and that change, and then be able to channel it, to learn more about it, and then also be able to possibly make a difference, and so that it doesn't happen again. And if nothing else, maybe we can bring some awareness and break some of the stigma around it, and some of the misconceptions that we have, not only just about mental illness, but how does mental illness and just what first responders go through, how can we just raise that awareness, and so that they can come home safely to their family, and not just be part of the community as their job and their calling, but then also just as people in the community.
Yeah, that's like you just said, making sure they come home safely and healthy, mentally healthy for their family. It's needed. I mean, we want to be national. That's our big dream, but you have to walk before you can run.
Sure.
The law we got passed, that should be nationwide. Why wouldn't it be?
Right.
So we're working towards that goal, but it's good healing process. I think we're doing some good things out there. I've had a couple people come up to me thanking me and telling me firsthand how much it's helped them heal, help them get mentally healthy, possibly avoid suicide. So I think we've saved some lives already, so we're happy.
Good deal. It's it's amazing. Well, I'm going to go back to, just for clarification, if there is a family member or a first responder listening, when you talk about free counseling, you don't have counselors on staff at the foundation. You have, if an officer or first responder goes to an agency and they don't want to either go through their insurance, is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, we have 4 counselors now that
you do
work with us. Yeah.
Okay.
So their names are in the card on our website.
Okay.
We're trying to find another one.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
New cards are going to be made up soon, Kevin.
Okay, so those are individuals that are working strictly for the foundation.
They have their own practices,
gotcha.
But they've just kind of they've dealt with first responders, similar like yourself.
Okay.
So it's a good fit that way.
Okay, so then they will allocate so many slots, or however that would be.
Right, and then they just bill me for their time.
I understand. Okay, so that will help from a clear, because we have talked about that before. Yes. So I just wanted to make sure that people kind of get somewhat of an understanding of how that works. So there are individuals that the police officers or the first responders and the families would recognize that you have talked to these 4 or 5 counselors. They know what it's like to work with first responders, and they have a certain level of experience as well as understanding and empathy of working with first responders.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, it's a good fit. We just need to fill one more slot, Kevin.
I feel my arm being twisted here. No, I have always had a deep appreciation and have worked with police officers, first responders. So we'll definitely talk. Right. We'll definitely talk.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, even though I did mean to put you on the spot.
I understand. You said something earlier about saving. There's already been good that's been done, and we've already saved lives. And one of the things that I realize when we do this type of work is that we'll never know how many funerals we didn't go to, and that's okay,
right?
But it's hard to measure prevention and early intervention. It's easy to measure the statistic of what happens when things go wrong or go bad, but it's hard to measure prevention and early intervention. But you guys are doing a great job. You're raising awareness. There's a lot of people that know about what you're doing, and most importantly, you're providing resources for people. As we wrap up, if there's one thing that you'd want to share with anyone that may be listening about, either about your journey, about the foundation, about your relationship with Greg, anything.
I guess it's a couple things. First of all, like I had said a couple times already, he was my best friend. He was always there for me. I think he would be very proud of the work we're doing because he cared so much about his fellow officers and the community. It's okay not to be okay is the big thing. When something happens, we had our pity parties. I was in not a great spot there for a while. But if you can turn something so negative in your life into a positive, it's a great feeling, and it's very rewarding. Like I said, it's just passionate about helping the first responders. The awareness, thanks for having me on, because this will help raise it too. We're here for the first responders and their families. I mean, they're always there for us. Why not, right?
Right, exactly. Well, Brad, thank you very much for being here, for the work that you're doing with the foundation, being a testament of your own story of healing and talking about what it was like going through this journey of not only being Greg's brother and when he was alive, but then also the journey since he's died and what you've done with that, and so that, as we say all the time, that this is another way of that he won't be forgotten, and that this though it was a tragic end of his physical life, the legacy in which he did for the community, in which he did for his fellow police officers, will live on as you continue to carry that. So thank you very much for being here.
Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here today. Definitely check out the Greg Lindmark Foundation.com. That's the website. And if you can and feel moved to participate by either donating or just becoming more aware about the foundation, please do that. Again, I want to thank Brad for being here, and thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.